What up, guys? So today we got a question from a blue belt who recently pissed off his brown belt training partner. So check it out. Got a question from Ty. Young guy, he said he's been training in Jiu-Jitsu and he's got a brown belt on the mat who's become kind of like his Jiu-Jitsu big brother, the guy that kind of took him under his wing, shows him the way and helps him out. Well, the other day they were rolling and Ty puts him into a guillotine choke, right? And the guillotine choke for him feels like it's kind of there. He makes some adjustments, but the brown belt doesn't tap. So he tries to make some more adjustments, puts a little bit more pressure. The brown belt doesn't tap. They keep doing this for about 4 minutes, right? And afterwards, the brown belt eventually got his head free and immediately just put it on him. And then after they got done rolling, he said the brown belt was like pretty irate, like, hey, bro, don't crank my neck, man. Come on. Like, was kind of pissed about it. So afterwards, Ty sent me messages like, hey, man, just looking for some thoughts and ideas. Like, what could I have done better? Like, what can I do in this situation? So, bro, thank you for the question. So I'm going to start this off. First off, I will give you a very specific tip that will save you from this ever happening again. I'll also talk about the higher belts perspective because the higher belt could have done something. It's something I do with all my lower belts and all of my students to this day, and it helps make them better. So 2 things that could have avoided the whole situation in the first place. But I'm going to share a story with you, and because I want you to understand this from a different perspective. The story's not going to sound like it has anything to do with you, but I promise you that at the root, it does, right? So years ago on this mat, I had one of my purple belts training with this brand new guy. He'd been with us for maybe a day or 2. Army guy, very, very nice, and a big fella, right? About 250. So he's rolling with my purple belt. The purple belt puts him in a triangle. The Army guy lifts him up, hoists him up in the air, and he's about to slam him to the ground, right? And then as soon as that happens, everybody's like, no, don't slam him. Don't slam him. And he stops, and he's like, kind of like deer in the headlights. He's, well, what's wrong? And I come up to him like, hey, man, like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I was going to slam him. I was like, why were you going to slam him? He said, well, I was like, I watch, Rampage slam people in Pride and UFC when they try to triangle, so I was going to slam him. I said, okay. I was like, well, what happens after Rampage slams them? He said, well, they get knocked out, right? Like you start seeing the light bulb go off and the wheels are turning. I'm like, yeah. I was like, maybe it wouldn't be the best way to start the weekend off by giving our bro on the mat a concussion on a sunny Saturday afternoon at 11:40, right? So he kind of like, oh, I get it now, right? He wasn't thinking. His body was in fight or flight. He's just trying to do something in the roll. He's scrambling because he doesn't really know what to do. And so he's just doing something. Now, I know these comments always come up because someone will use this as an example of why jiu-jitsu is not realistic. It's not effective. We're just playing for a normal sport day. We're not trying to do self-defense or fighting right now. If it's a day where we're focused on fighting, we will approach it very differently. My fighting jiu-jitsu is a bit different than my just play around jiu-jitsu. So if you're one of those people that's just ready to keyboard warrior it up, just chill. So he wasn't thinking about what was going to happen afterwards. He's just trying to win, right? Now you, in your situation, you had your partner in a guillotine choke. You're squeezing and adjusting, right? Applying pressure. You're just trying to get the choke. You're just trying to get the tap. And you probably don't have the best guillotine choke, it seems like. So you don't even know what it's like to actually feel it, to be doing it right, because you thought you had it sunk in, but you didn't. And so in this situation, you're not necessarily thinking about, well, me cranking on this guy's neck for 4 minutes, what does that mean afterwards? Because, at a best case scenario, your brown belt training partner's probably going to be walking around like this for the next couple days, right? When someone says his name, like, hey, brown belt guy, what's up, man? He's going to have to turn because he won't have use of his neck. Worst case scenario is if he's had any damage done to his neck, you could be in potentially, damaging his discs and giving him long-term injuries, right? Because just wrenching on someone's neck, that stuff adds up. Neck cranks are pretty dangerous when you think of them as sort of a cumulative, right? Not just the one time, but if you get your neck wrenched on for years, bro, that can do some nasty damage, right? That's why I tap to neck cranks pretty quick. In the gym and in a competition, I'll fight them, but in the gym, I tap to them pretty quick because I'm not going to eat that damage. But with your situation, you didn't mean to, you just weren't thinking about it, and you don't have a good sort of grip on as to whether or not this move is in. So I've got a solution for you. So here's what you do. When you're rolling with someone and you put them into some sort of choke, let's say the guillotine choke, what would have been a better way to do it is you're sitting there squeezing, give it maybe 4 or 5 seconds, 10, I guess, if you're being really generous with it. And if you don't feel like that person is beginning to fidget and try to get out of this, loosen up a little bit and talk to them because you have a good relationship with this guy, right? So say, hey, bro, is this choke in? Do you feel this? And he's, of course, going to say, well, no, it's just cranking my neck. Now, at that point, you can either let go of the choke or you can even ask for help. You can say, hey man, could you help me, like, just so I can feel what it's like to do this properly, so I can make sure I don't crank on people's necks. And then he can say, hey, do this with your arm, and then you can get a feeling for what it's like to do a correct guillotine choke. Now, why is that so important about the feeling? Because jiu-jitsu is not about seeing. You know as well as I do that you were looking at the guillotine choke and you're like, oh, it looks like it's in, but it's not in, is it? So what you have to develop is a feeling for jiu-jitsu. This is why someone can look at jiu-jitsu and it's like, oh, this is easy, and then they get a feeling for it and it's like, oh, this is a completely different ballgame. You need to get a feeling for it. So by doing that and allowing yourself to know what it feels like to do it incorrect, and then to get feedback from a higher belt especially, and then adjust, oh, there it is, there's my guillotine. Then you know what it's like. That is the feeling that you're shooting for every time you go for one, right? And so that would be a better way. If you put someone into a submission and it isn't working, it's not tapping, loosen up a little bit and chat with them about it, especially if someone you have a relationship with, right? As we're training with people, I do this all the time. I will ask for feedback. I'm like, hey, did that put a lot of pressure on you when I was doing that pass? Or, hey, when I put that particular move on you, did you feel that there or whatever? I'll ask them for feedback so I can make sure that I'm doing what I want to do. Do this as a black belt. You can do this at any level. It's very important. Because again, we're not just trying to win right now. We're trying to become better. We're trying to develop skill, right? So that's one way to do it. Now, for the higher belt, if you're a higher belt in this situation, check this out. It's fine afterwards, if you wish, to go a little harder and be like, man, you wrenched on my damn neck and you're kind of like pissed off. I get it. I've been that way before, because you're like, dude, you're wrenching on my neck. I'm going to be jacked up for the rest of the weekend. You might have cervical disc issues. So you might be like, I don't want to have surgery on this damn thing. Stop being an asshole. I totally get it. But you got to give them something to do afterwards. You can't like slap their hand, be like, no, and then not tell them what they should be doing, because then they're just like, I don't know what I was doing wrong, right? You got to give them something to go off of, right? So if you're a higher belt, I'm not saying you got to be the coach, but afterwards what you can do is you can just say, hey man, like when you're trying to do that move, do this instead, because you'll be able to actually get the choke on me, right? And again, I will tell you like this, I tap to crank so fast. I was at a seminar just a few months ago and I was with a guy rolling at the seminar and he put me in a neck crank. He wasn't trying to crank my neck. He was actually trying to go for a choke, but he's a lower belt and it just wasn't there. So I just tapped. And afterwards I was like, hey man, come real quick, try this out. And I adjusted his arm. I was like, that's where you actually want to have it. Because again, I don't want to get my neck wrenched on. I don't want to get cranked. Now, if someone catches me in a good choke, I'll tap to that and I'll be like, hey, that was a good one. But with a crank, I'll just tap and like, hey, do this instead, right? And again, it's so important because when you guys are training, we're trying to help each other make each other better. So again, that's my idea, right? Like, so Ty, in your situation, loosen up on the choke if it's not there in a few seconds, 5 seconds, whatever, and then get feedback from your training partner, adjust it a little bit, or move on to something else. And likewise for the higher belt, give them some sort of solution to their problem. Don't just tell them what they did wrong. Don't get pissed off about it. I understand it's irritating, but give them something else so this way they can fix it so it doesn't happen again. So that's the idea, guys. I'll talk to you next time.